Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second Amplify session. I know I see some familiar names who were at LI. We are going to focus on next week. We're going to focus heavily on with all the information on that we learned at LI. What do we do with that information? So we're going to be joined by Hayden Ron, who is one of the presenters and facilitators for that program. But today I am joined by CJ Gibson, who I'll let him introduce himself in a second. My name is Dominic Green, Senior Director of Chapter Development. I'm a DU from the Oregon chapter, grew up in Southern California. I currently live in Washington, D.C. And then I was a long-term volunteer for the fraternity, but also spent a significant amount of time as a campus professional, fraternity and sorority advisor, and former chapter advisor for Kansas State. So CJ, tell us who you are.
Hey, everybody. My name is CJ Gibson. I'm from the Western Illinois chapter, which I know has some representation on this call, but I'm from Illinois. I not as much history as Dominic. However, I did volunteer for the fraternity in the 2 years I was in grad school, and then when I finished up there, I just kind of happened to have this opportunity open up for me, and I've been on staff now for just over a year and 2 months.
Perfect. Thanks, CJ. What CJ is trying to say is that I'm old, so perfect. All right, so we are going to specifically talk about recruitment training. We talked last week. If you had joined us for Amplify, I know it was the week getting ready for LI, but a significant amount of next week's program, which we will put the recording up on the website this week. So those of you, I know a couple of you, I think on this call have asked about that recording. So that recording, specifically last week, we talked about the importance of strategically when it comes to event planning and how do we make sure we get the right people in the right place? How do we make sure that we're organized as a recruitment team? How are we planning and executing all the events and just getting prepared, right? So what does that look like to have potentially already have people on your names list going forward? For some of the chapters, I know that on this call are currently doing summer recruitment as well. So what does that look like? And we'll talk about that next week, but what does that look like to continue beyond once you get the guys and the men in place and accept bids? What does that look like to already start planning for your spring class as well? So what we're going to do though, the importance of this session specifically is around recruitment training. And what does that look like for your chapter? I mentioned this. I think I mentioned this at LI last week, specifically around not only is it a CP requirement about your chapter preparing and having some kind of recruitment training seminar as far as CP, but it's also just really important. I think this is one of the things that chapters really take for granted and think like, oh yeah, my guys know how to recruit, they're fine, we got it. And then often when potential members show up to the door, you realize that some of your chapter members who have never been on the other side before just don't know how to recruit. They don't know what to talk about. They don't know what questions to ask. And it becomes a little bit awkward for everyone in the room, right? So I think this is where we're really trying to get you to best prepare your chapter going into the recruitment process. So whether you are the VP recruitment on the recruitment team or another officer, this is really important information to pass on to your chapter. But I'm going to ask CJ, from your perspective, when you're an exec board member, chapter president, but why was recruitment training and preparation for recruitment important for your chapter when you were an undergrad?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I kind of came into my chapter at a point where recruitment was pretty critical, as I know it is for a lot of our chapters right now. We were down in the teens, and so number one, it was important just so that we made sure we had people coming in after us, keep the chapter alive. But also, I think it helped by going through some training at the beginning. It helped us understand, okay, who are we looking for as a chapter, right? Like, who is it that we're looking for? What are those qualities? Where can we find them? All those good things. And then I think the second piece of it that was a big help was we might have had some guys in the chapter who were maybe a little bit more socially awkward, not as outgoing. And so by having recruitment training, it allowed us to give everybody roles, and that kind of helped some of those guys who maybe that weren't the most outgoing to know, okay, here's exactly what I need to do. Here's whether that's manning the pool station, whether that's helping guys get through the house, whether that's helping them fill out some paperwork, whatever that small role might be for some of those guys. It helps them to just know, all right, this is what I need to do. I don't need to worry about X, Y, and Z. I can just focus in on whatever my role is. And so I think that ultimately helped those guys, and it allowed those members of the chapter who were a little bit more outgoing to, not feel as pressured when it comes to some of those smaller things of trying to rush people through the entire process. So those were the two main things that I think really helped with um, membership training.
No, absolutely. Thank you, CJ. And I think that's important. We talked a little about this last week about having a game plan. I mean, if you think about sports analogies, if you go, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever sport, watching Olympics right now, every coach and every training team getting ready, they have a game plan, right? They have, they specifically structure a plan for their big game, right? Or for us, it's really for if it's primary recruitment, if it's informal recruitment, if it's summer recruitment, right? I was a product of summer recruitment and really enjoyed that. But I think every chapter has to go in with different strategies, and this is a lot of. But we want to make sure that everyone is prepared and everyone is ready to go whenever you are recruiting, right? So it could be a lot of you are currently in the process of recruiting, right? And what does that look like, right? So you're right in the middle of summer recruitment, you're continuing to recruit people, but ultimately you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So what we have done in the past. So in January, we put out a specific train the trainer program. So it is on the if you go on Delta Upsilon's programming tab, and if you go under recruitment programming, there is a train the trainer recruitment video that is part of our January. It was our winter Amplify series. It's about 90 minutes, and this program is designed that you can either show it specifically to your recruitment team. You could use it as a facilitator guide for you to train your chapter. So it's really designed. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through that training in a more condensed version. And then what I'm going to offer to you all is that I can send you the slides that actually have the facilitator guide and actually have the training questions in it, right? So there are specific things that you can use, but I wanted to have this because this was not one of the live sessions last year because we wanted to do an in-depth program, but the way the video that's on the DU website right now is designed, it's myself and Hayden Ron, who was former staff member and volunteer for us, is that we designed it that you could pause it, ask the questions to your chapter, and then be able to hit play and then have us and then basically have Hayden and I will help facilitate the conversation and kind of the background as for all the different activities. So it's something we've done. I know I've done a similar type of program for some of your chapters even on this call right now, but it's really specifically designed to make sure that you're prepared, because I think we say, hey, prepare your chapter for recruitment, but a lot of chapters don't know what that looks like. So this is what's kind of going to go into the program. I'm not going to spend, this is not going to be a 90-minute call. I realize some of you are on the East Coast right now, including myself. So we're going to talk about all these things, be able to get your chapter ready, make sure you can help identify what we're looking for, what do you talk about, how do we make sure we're planning throughout for recruitment as we're going along. And then, as I mentioned before, we will offer the webinar is posted, but I can also send the PowerPoint slides, which includes the facilitator guide within the notes pages of the slides. So we definitely want to offer this to y'all just to make sure that you have these resources going into it. Because trust me, even if you're already mid-recruitment, there's often times that you realize as the recruitment, whether you're on the committee or you're in charge of recruitment, that there's definitely some roadblocks in place that you realize that your members need specifically more training. I think we can learn a lot from our women's groups. I know we actually have some advisors on the call, but specifically of how important it is to prepare our chapters for recruitment, for conversation skills, of of really working on that strategy to recruit the best possible people for their chapter. So I think we just want to make sure, I think this has been a blind spot for us for a couple of years. So we want to make sure that, like I said, some chapters are very much prepared for this, but other chapters really don't have a strategy going in and just kind of wing it. I realize that winging it is often what happens in chapters. Trust me, we did this a few times in our chapter, but we never did this for recruitment. That was the one thing my chapter, even at times when we were disorganized, we very much took recruitment training seriously. And it could look a lot of different ways. So one of the things I'll just share my story. And when I joined a chapter that we broke up a lot of what we're going to talk about today in this session, specifically chapter meetings. So our recruitment VP, when recruitment was over, we would have his reports maybe a month after recruitment was doing some of these activities with the chapter. So we would do role playing. We would ask the tough questions to get people prepared, right? He was the second associate member meeting. He was going to that meeting and having a recruitment training conversation with the brand new associate members, right? So these were things that he was continuously active in the recruitment process because he was trying to prepare the next VP recruitment, depending what semester it was, for recruitment that next semester. So that new person didn't have to get elected in November and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any train. I don't have anything prepared. I don't have anything booked. I don't have any events scheduled. So think about that. So this is a big thing about, I've been doing many of our chapters in DU. I've been on staff now, back on staff now for 6 years now. And often chapters, the VP recruitment does a week of formal recruitment and then is done. Like he almost says like retired, like I did my time, I did a week of formal recruitment, I'm done. And we just can't have that happen if we want to continue to grow our chapter. So I've often said this, and last year I think I got on my soapbox, had a soapbox moment and said, hey, if your VP recruitment is done and doesn't want to do recruitment anymore, please elect a new person. Please appoint a new VP recruitment or someone who's going to be in charge of informal recruitment, because we cannot afford to just let the person, because he's burned out and fried, allow to us to do nothing the rest of the semester, especially in the fall as we get ready for spring semester. But that could also happen too, especially for summer recruitment chapters. I also saw it where all right, we hit our goal, boom, we're done. And then there's still plenty of opportunities that even if the guys who you might not sign right now, you might be able to still connect to those guys because they can be very much so part of your spring class as well, right? Depending on bed space is open or whatever that looks like. So just thinking about that depending where you are with recruitment. So I'm going to walk through some of the activities. I'm not going to go through each one, but I think I'm not going to go in depth for like 15 minutes about each one like we did on the pre-recorded webinar. But please stop me if you have any questions along the way. Please ask. If you have not done so as well, please put your name, chapter, and role in the chat box for attendance purposes. So one of the things my chapter did, we would cancel the chapter right before recruitment started. We had formal recruitment. So we did some recruitment. We also had a formal recruitment period in the fall. Is we would cancel chapter, all depending on how many guys are in the chapter at the time, anywhere between 60, 70 guys. We would have every single person in the room sit in a circle and literally ask them, why did you join DU? Have everyone in the chapter share their recruitment story. Who did you meet? Where did you look when you're looking at other chapters? Why did you pick DU, right? So share who recruited you, right? Who's the reason that got you to say, yes, I'm gonna be a DU. I can still remember that moment. I was going through summer recruitment, and I ended up spent a month at my dad's place, and my dad lived in overseas, and I visited my dad, and the DU chapter called me when I was there, unexpectedly, because every other chapter was like, oh, you're going to be gone for a month. All right, we'll see you later. And the DU recruitment chair really sold me on the organization. So I still remember like who recruited me, why, what hooked me, what got me interested in DU. And then when I went to the chapter and like who actually recruited me when I actually got to the chapter house, and I was ready to go. So just think about that, is really asking your DU why. Everyone has a different story. Recruitment is very much about storytelling. So what do you remember about your process? And while there's going to be a lot of similarities and themes throughout, there's also going to be some very kind of unique reasons why someone joined DU, right? Of they made a connection with one individual person, or maybe their dad is a DU, or they just they rolled, they'd gotten bids from 6 other fraternities and rolled 6 fraternities and rolled the dice, and it landed on a 3, and they're like, well, 3 is DU, I'm just going to join. Whatever that looks like, right? You all are going to have different stories, and it's really powerful to get people remembering why they joined, and all those stories. And I think it's a really powerful exercise to get everyone to share why they joined, and really what that looks like for them. So it's a really important activity to start off a recruitment webinar, in-person thing. These are also, as I said, could be things that you could do throughout the year. It doesn't always. So these activities can be done. You could pick and choose what activities you want to do for your chapter. But I also think some of these can be done all right before a formal recruitment process or like a start of a summer process. Specifically, some chapters will focus on the men who have maybe never have gone through recruitment before. I mentioned before, like my chapter, we started doing recruitment training literally week 2 with them, having and then getting and having recruitment activities throughout the semester at chapter meetings when they were there as well. But it was the brand new associate members, but it's also, especially going into the fall, it was the sophomores, the rising sophomores who have never been through recruitment on the other side before. So we wanted to make sure that they were ready to go as well. So one of the things we'll do is we'll do a conversation about tell us about yourself. And this is brotherhood building. We want to know more about our brothers, right? More than just like hometowns, majors, and maybe an activity or a hobby or so. But what do we know about our brothers? And this is where a conversation where each brother on their own will share their passions. I often, with an activity like this, will have flip chart paper, give everyone a marker, and what are your passions, right? So if you could pick 3 things to tell you about you. So is it faith? Is it family? Is it sports? Whatever that looks like for you, right? So like one of the things that's really important to me is I'm quarter Japanese. A lot of people don't realize I'm part Asian, but I think it's really important because I grew up in Hawaii, and then we moved to California. But it's a really important part of my background. But it's also sometimes some of these 3 things can also be fun facts as well. But we want to go deeper than name, hometown, and major, right? We want to get a little bit deeper. So about your brothers when you're meeting potential new members and you meet the guy who played baseball, you meet the guy that is a super video game guy, right? Is really into video games, or he's very much very that his faith is really important to him. How can you connect him with the other brothers in your chapter or associate chapter that have those same passions, right? So a lot of recruitment is making sure that you have a deep connection. And as we all know this, if you're going into recruitment, it's very obvious to people from other chapters if you don't like each other. Trust me, I've been to some chapters before to help with pre-recruitment activities and realizing that, like, wow, I literally did a timeout to a chapter and I said, I don't think you guys like each other. And they all looked at me and then they were like, and someone was like, you're right. Someone raised their hand. He's like, you're absolutely right. So we had to have a conversation to talk about things, to talk about in that particular chapter. Everyone wrote, if I could change one thing about the blank chapter, it would be this. And it was an anonymous activity to just get people talking about, to make sure that they could clear the air and get on the same page. So, but for this particular thing, that we want you to focus on what are the 3 things that you're most passionate about, and tell guys to get creative. In some cases, I've seen it. I've done this activity where I will have guys illustrate the top 3 things. The top 3 things that they're most passionate about. So just something to think about from your perspective. All right. Also, another activity is what's your favorite thing about DU, 1-word answer. Have everyone go around the room. So this is where you can put this on a flip chart, but this is where it could be really important for you to really focus on specifically 1-word answer, right? So this could be the brotherhood, this could be the food, this could be our house, right? I'm just thinking, our Kansas chapter and our Kansas State chapters have really nice houses, right? So, and people love living in those houses, right? So what does that look like for them? So this can be a wide variety of what this looks like for you, but this is a good opportunity to get them thinking about their favorite thing about you. And like I said, this could be this is where people can have fun with this, but I do think that it's important. It's important to think about is really what's important to them, and what's their favorite thing about you, right? And specifically, this goes into the conversation about branding. And I think those of you who work with social media or things like that, is really understanding what's your brand. I think we can think about the corporate connections about Apple. You can think about the people's experience with Apple computer products, right? So, and what that looks like for them. What are people's personal experience with Apple? What is the customer service experience like? Why do you like that? What's expected of Apple, right? So there's specific things you think about for the DU brand. And I think often I've seen this activity done before, and you don't have to put this in the chat box, but in 1 word, what is your chapter's brand? Like, what are you known for when you interact with people? This could be non-Greeks, this could be sororities, this could be, this could be anyone on campus. When they think about Delta Upsilon at North Dakota, at Western Illinois, or at Michigan Tech, what is specifically your chapter known for? Because I think this is a good activity for all of you to talk about this. And this will help you in trying to figure out what you're selling, what you're about. And some of this can also be what your current brand is and what your aspirational brand is, right? And often for our newer chapters on campus, they don't have a brand, right? Their brand is we don't have one, or it's unknown because they haven't been around long enough. They don't have, they haven't started planning their first philanthropy event. They haven't participated in a lot of campus events yet, right? So that's okay. Their aspirational brand is they want, they want to be, what do they want to be known for, right? They want to be the good guys, the gentlemen. They want to be known as cool ducks, whatever that looks like, right? But what do you all? This is a good conversation to have amongst yourselves, and this is where you can have people be honest, right? I've had chapters be very honest with me at this activity. Is what in reality, what does this look like? And does that mean they're nerds? Does that mean they're jerks? I've heard a wide range of adjectives to describe, but guys being honest. If they're thinking about outsiders looking in about what they think about DU, is what that would look like for them. So just think about that from your perspective. So and I mentioned before, is what is your brand? What do you do? What are you known for? How do you describe your chapters? How would other chapters describe you? A lot of it is that customer service experience. Is really, but this will really help you going into the recruitment process, and also help you think about what you want to profile on social media, right? So this is specific. If you want to do brother profiles, especially if you're trying to build your brand on campus, what does it look like to show activity, right? What does it look like to share your story on campus? And the brand, once you guys get on the same page of what your brand is, this will be significantly helpful as you're building a social media strategy for your chapter, right? So I think this is important for all of you, that and knowing how important social media is what does this look like to build that brand, but really have an identity and know what you're known for, right? Because I think there are some chapters I work with, and I'm not going to name names, that have there's very huge dichotomy of what they stand for. There's two different things, right? And it's hard because those two things contradict with each other. So it's interesting dynamic of often chapters, like I said, it doesn't have to you don't all have to be the same cookie cutter person, but it's good to be on the same page of who you are and then really what you're looking for moving forward. So specifically when we talked about what do you do, I wanted to talk about specifically brotherhood events. This is a big part of the recruitment process, but I do think it's important to, we talked last week about event planning and what goes into the best types of events, but I do think it's important to think about in the recruitment process, when potential new members talk to you, is what do you do, right? So from a brotherhood standpoint, service, philanthropy, what major campus events are you involved with, right? When it comes to social events, intramural events, maybe all the things that individual brothers, like major things that individual brothers are involved with, right? So I know like in some campuses, homecoming's a big deal. I know at University of Kansas, like Rock Review is a big thing. At University of Oklahoma, it's Scandals is also like a major song and dance competition, whatever that looks like, right? So what are the major things you're involved with, and this is where, when I talk about storytelling, this is where the storytelling comes in, right? So thinking about, you need to be able to make sure that guys in your chapter are prepared to talk about when I talk about what are your favorite things about DU, they should necessarily fall in some of these categories, but we should be able to talk about what do you do, because this is something we've seen recently. I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, I've noticed this when I've gone in to do this type of training. When I ask them, what are you guys known for? What do you do? I've had chapters literally not be able to answer this question. So it's very important that you have this conversation with your chapter, make sure that everyone is on the same page, and everyone can have different answers. This is totally something where you can have different answers of people's favorite brotherhood event, right? What's your favorite philanthropy event, right? What does that look like for you all to participate? Some people might be big time in flag football and soccer, and other guys are going to be really excited about esports or something else, right? So just making sure that you have an idea for this. But like I said, what goes back to the brand, what is your chapter known for, associate chapter known for? What events do brothers get excited for? Do you have signature events? This is really important for recruitment as well. Like signature events could be a recruitment event. On my chapter, we did a rafting trip every year. So it was a brotherhood. Sometimes it was a date trip, but we literally took people away for 4 days, and people went camping. We went whitewater rafting, like legit, like category 4 rapids. Like it was very much a signature event, but it was something that we look forward to every year. We also rented cabins in the winter, went skiing together, right? So these are some big signature brotherhood events that we did, on top of just general brotherhood events. But like I said, these are things that people got excited for, and these are things, but making sure though that you're on the same page so people understand what people care about and what you do. Sometimes people need reminders, which I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but sometimes people need reminders of what you guys do. I will say this: some chapters who are newer or who are younger, it's very okay to talk about recruitment is all about selling the potential. So if there are activities, like you're looking for the potential in and men you're recruiting, but also they're looking, but also you're selling the potential of the chapter or associate chapter. So I've seen some chapters I've worked with of selling their what they're looking forward to, right? So we talked about this page about the things that they want to do. Some of those things might not have happened yet, but you can tell them about all the specific things you have planned going into that semester and all the things you're really excited for. So don't be afraid to talk about the events you have scheduled, but please make sure that you're not just selling them something and then you have no plans of doing that, because then you're basically pulling a fast one on them. So please remember to think about what that looks like. So going forward, I don't want to be super redundant. We want to talk about, this is where we just think about everyone coming up with the top 5 reasons why they join their chapter. This is where I've given guys their individual sheets of paper. They fill out what are their favorite things about the chapter. So we just went through some of these activities. We've talked a plethora of things that things your chapter does, things you're known for, all of those things. So this is now an opportunity for guys individually to write down their top 5 reasons, the best reasons why someone would join DU. And then what you want to do is, as a chapter, I've done this before. I usually have each individual go around and share their top 3, and then we'll create a list. So often this list, depending on how many people are in the room, might be 15 or 20. And then as a chapter, you will have a conversation around what are the 10 best reasons to join your chapter, right? The difference between joining Michigan Tech, North Dakota, Florida, Embry-Riddle, Northwestern, whatever it looks like, is it is going to look different, right? So, and we want to make sure for this particular activity, I'll go back to this slide, is being a little bit more specific than brotherhood, right? So the brotherhood could be great, but what are specific things about the brotherhood? So are there specific examples of brotherhood about, we help each other study, right? We play sports together, right? So what are some of the favorite things? I know for some chapters, winning the all intramural title, the all sports title is a really big thing, right? So for them, thinking about the best reasons to join your chapter. So I think when we say, hey, our brotherhood's great, or we're so diverse, making sure that you get a little bit more specific, because people might ask you, all right, your brotherhood's great, tell me about your brotherhood. And it's possible that people might have 25, 50, 70 different answers, right? But making sure as you're compiling this list, and it's important to come up with this list because so everyone can be on the same page, where you can pull out your favorite of the top 10, but at least you're all going to be relatively on the same page, and we're making sure that we're not contradicting ourselves when we're talking to potential new members. So shifting to something CJ mentioned before is thinking about what qualities we're looking for in an ideal DU. What's the first thing comes to mind? So what does this look like? Are we looking, we could say we're looking for scholars. We're looking for people who care about involvement activities. We wanted people who care about being in a leadership role, right? Some chapters really care about their intramural team. So we want people who have some interest in participating in an IM team, right? So whatever this looks like for you, it's a good idea that once again, to get everyone on the same page is, what are we looking for? What kind of guy are we looking for, right? So you can have some humor, some fun with this activity, and you can just brainstorm. This is once again using that flip chart paper, is really asking guys what this looks like. So brainstorming everything that comes out of people's mouths and really having a conversation of what are the top things that we're really looking for to make sure we're all on the same page, because it's possible that some chapters are, it's good to have a diversity of individual ideas and involvement pieces, but it's also making sure that relatively that we also support each other. So we could have like 20 different things on this list, but we want to make sure that how we articulate that and how we talk about it, and why it helps play into the diversity of the organization. But we also want to make sure that we're not being like, oh, well, that's just one thing we're looking for, but that's not important to the rest of us, right? We want to make sure that we're also not trashing the things that other people are saying. So a big part of this, I think CJ mentioned this as well. So we talked about what we're looking for and the qualities. Where do we find them, right? So this is going to be a brainstorming activity. This is where we talk about where do people study on campus? Where do people eat on campus? Where do people hang out on campus? Actually, the eat one isn't even on here, but what does that look like for you all to determine what that looks like? So last week we talked about is in the preparation of recruitment process that at Oregon, when Hayden was in school, they would do about a 3-4 hour training session for everyone in the chapter to get prepared. And then they would make sure that everyone had letters on, and they would spread out all over campus and go to dining halls. They would go to the students, to all the dining halls where freshmen might hang out. They went to the rec center. They went to the they went to the student union building, whatever that looks like for you, is they got out on campus and just met people, right? So what does that look like? But we also want to make sure, though, specifically around the involvement piece, as someone who ran a student involvement office on a college campus, is really making sure that you have a very clear idea of where guys are involved on campus and how do you capitalize on that, right? So what does it look like um, to capitalize on that, making sure that you are getting guys involved in lots of student organizations, but how do you place people in organizations that freshmen might join? So this might be sports clubs and organizations. This could be religious clubs and organizations. This could be a wide variety of things, but you have to think about the long game. It's often when people join as a freshman, then they could get involved in that a year later in a leadership role. And that is a huge pipeline to the chapter to give us potential names for potential new members, right? So depending on your campus, there's sometimes more opportunities to get involved than others, but I highly recommend as much involvement in outside organizations, the better, just because it opens up new pipelines and even potentially to guys who might have never thought they'd join a fraternity, but because you might be in an academic organization on campus, or you could be involved in a cultural organization, whatever that might look like for you, the people that are like, oh, I never even thought about a fraternity, but hey, I like you, we're friends, why don't we, sure, I'll go to one of your events. And that could obviously work out well for us, right? So I think this is a big conversation. I think learning a lot from our women's groups. I know some of the chapters I've worked with in the past have actually practiced conversation skills with sororities. So hear me out before you laugh at me. But they literally, because the women also need practice as well going into formal recruitment. So they did, the guys bought pizza or some kind of cheap food, and then they went over to the sorority house, or the women came over to the fraternity house, and they literally practiced conversation skills. What do you talk about? What are the best open-ended questions? If you need a reminder, we need to make sure that these questions will not solicit just one word answers, right? We want to make sure that we're listening to people, we're asking follow-up questions. So what does it look like to get people practicing? This is what we did, I mentioned before, when I was in school during chapter meetings. We would usually have a recruitment chair would have 2 or 3 pre-planned questions, and he'd have everyone in the chapter switch roles and role play of either someone being a PNM or someone being a recruiter, and then we would ask questions to get people prepared just to have small talk, because we all realize that recruitment camp, as CJ mentioned before too, recruitment's awkward. I think someone told me, this is not my quote, that recruitment is the fine art of awkward man flirting, right? You might have heard me say this before, but it can be awkward. So we want to make sure that people feel comfortable. But also, CJ mentioned too, is we want to make sure that you get your best recruiters as possible, that, because sometimes people can talk to my Red Bull can that I'm holding and get it to join D, right? I'm kidding, but we want to make sure. But then there's other people that are like, just get tongue tied and have no idea what to say. And I had guys in my chapter like that just would put their foot in the mouth, and we're just like, you know what, I'd rather just flip burgers or play basketball in the back. We also had a sand volleyball court in the back of our chapter house as well. So it was something, whatever works best for you. People want to be involved in recruitment, but they don't necessarily always have to be the primary recruiters, but we want to make sure that you're practicing conversation skills. And I think a big part of that, we'll talk about in a second of what that looks like, but not just like, what's your name? Where do you go to high school? What do you do in high school? But like, if they tell you, that they played soccer, ask questions about their experience playing soccer, right? I think one of my favorite questions to ask them is, hey, you're a brand new freshman at the University of Kansas. Like, hey, why did you pick KU, right? I'm always curious of like what are the schools that they check out? What was it about KU that they really liked? Talking about, and then asking about their major, what they want to do with that. But that opens up a really good, interesting conversation with them of why they specifically chose the school that you're currently at, and then and those connections back to Delta Upsilon. Like, really, like, what do they want to get out of fraternity? They're at a fraternity recruitment event. Like, what kind of fraternity experience do they want, right? Do they just want a stereotypical social athletic drinking club experience, or do they actually want a fraternity, right? So these are great opportunities to ask the right questions, making sure that this is also something to practice too, is what topics should we stay away from? What are the actual red flags from PNMs? You all need to get on a same page. And not to say negative, but it's important to have this conversation of what do us as brothers not talk about. And for a lot of chapters, those are social topics. People stay away from politics. We are in an election year. It's really, you all need to stay on the same page. But like, we want our brothers to be on the same page, but sometimes if this is going to potentially cause some drama in the recruitment process, which I saw sometimes in my chapter or even as an advisor. What are some of the things that the PNMs are saying? I know some chapters, red flags might be if the person automatically is talking about alcohol, drugs, automatically asking about how many, they only want to talk about social events, or what your rank is on this on the social hierarchy, on campus, right? That person could be a good member, but you have to be able to feel comfortable. Like, how do you role play? This is another thing we used to do in my chapter, is how do you role play? Is if someone being a PNM that is looking for things that might conflict what you guys are selling or what you're looking for, is how do you handle that situation professionally, and how do you make sure that you have a good response to what that person is saying, or how do you deflect it to talk about all the good things DU is doing? Because that person might be like, oh wow, this is awesome, yes, I want to party, but there might also be PNMs that go through recruitment that are clearly just looking for a party, and they don't really care about the actual fraternal bonds that we offer, right? So something to think about. And why would someone not get a bid? Is there something that they might say? Is there specifically some red flags, right? And this is not necessarily an opportunity to just turn this into a blackball session, but really it's a good opportunity, a healthy conversation the chapter should have with each other. This is also big important things when we're talking about conversation topics and getting your chapter prepared, is responding to difficult situations. These are excuses why they wouldn't join. You can't afford it, you don't have enough time, I just want to party, or the opposite, I don't party, right? That's also the other concept. My parents don't want me to join, I only want to join a large organization, I don't want to be hazed, I'm worried about my grades, I don't drink or do drugs. I've also seen, my partner, my girlfriend, my boyfriend aren't comfortable with me joining a fraternity. So how do you respond to these questions and making sure people, at least the primary recruiters, or enough people in the chapter, because it might trickle down, and it might be someone who is not super involved in recruitment. It might be like, this could even be, I'll say this could be a very uninvolved junior who just shows up because he wants free food at your recruitment event, and he ends up in a conversation with someone who's like, hey, like, you guys did great, but like, I don't think I have enough time, or I'm worried about my grades. Like, how does that person respond to this? So it's good to practice these conversations to really make sure that you feel comfortable, and making sure that, how do you respond to this, right? So I'll use I can't afford it. You can talk about payment plans. We can talk about what can the chapter do. Often chapters have scholarships available. I think this is a good conversation to talk about, what does that look like? I know for me, I got a part-time job, right? I worked anywhere between 15 to 20 hours a week, and I ended up I paid for all of my fraternity expenses, my dues and social dues. And when I was in college, my parents paid for room and board, but it's a conversation that you can talk about what other brothers do. This is also a great opportunity to connect them with someone in your chapter who doesn't drink, right? So, hey, connect them to Adam. Adam's not a drinker, and Adam's been great, and Adam's had a fantastic experience in this organization. So people can still have a good experience. Or someone who has ridiculously high grades and is on the dean's list. How do you connect that person with the scholars and the really people who care about their grades in the chapter, to let them have that conversation? For the parent conversation, we might have some brothers in the chapter who might have parents that were skeptical at first, and then are true believers in DU and love DU. Some chapters have a parents club, connect them with the parents. So we had parents that had always volunteered every year to be the parents. Like, hey, if John's parents don't want him to join, they were willing to reach out to John's parents and be able to say, hey, I just want to let you know what my experience, my son's experience has been like. And a lot of it is making sure that he is going to get good grades. He isn't going to get hazed. He is going to have a safe experience at the chapter house. So being prepared to have those conversations as well. Last thing, we talked about lasting impact. So I talked about, remember at the beginning, I talked about why did you join? The last question my chapter would do, so we would do a recruitment training. The last question we'd ask is, why are you still here? How has DU impacted you? And I think from whether you're a sophomore to a senior, this can definitely solicit a lot of pretty emotional responses. I've seen guys cry in this activity to really reflect. And I think often 18 to 22-year-olds don't do a lot of reflection in their DU experience. But what does that look like to talk about what DU has done for them personally? And especially, it's pretty impactful to hear from your seniors. This goes back to the storytelling, right? That DU is not free. No one's holding you hostage, right? You clearly are still in the organization because it's made an impact on you. But sometimes this is an opportunity for guys to actually reflect and articulate that. We did this every year. Why did you join? Why are you still here? And I walked in, and that was an activity that I've talk to you about many chapters, but one of the most powerful activities you can do to just really it's the storytelling piece that really has a major impact. So one of the things that you can do, this is a side story, but especially in continuous recruitment training for people who have never done this before, but many chapters I've worked with have had everyone will practice. So we've talked about why, what we're looking for, why I joined, what the DU impact has had on me. If you gave everyone 30 seconds, so think about the elevator pitch, you're on the 100th floor and you have 30 seconds until you hit the first floor. What would you tell a potential new member about your experience at DU, right? So having everyone being prepared, and this is where we would practice, right? We'd have everyone go around and kind of share, these are the most important things to me, and this is why I joined you, right? To be able to, this is where you want to practice that, because it's sometimes, like I said, it can be awkward, or you're like, oh wow, I've had so many great experiences, but doing a recruitment training activity like this really gets people talking about that. So we also want to make sure, if you're doing a recruitment training, that you talk about logistics, next steps, like what does this look like for roles, responsibilities, schedule events, what does it look like for membership selection and bidding process, all of those things, but making sure that there's you have and those continued relationships involved for the people who might not accept bids. Especially my friends who do summer recruitment, we always had some guys who were like, my parents don't want me to move in right away, but they might be fine with if I break my contract in January and move in the spring, right? So what does this look like to continue to have a relationship with these guys and keep them in your recruitment tracker, and invite them to events throughout the fall, because they probably will join in the spring, right? So, and then lastly, I think just wanted to make sure that you feel comfortable too, is going around and making sure that people are committed to helping with recruitment. We have seen a major issue since post-COVID is chapters are struggling with member engagement of how do you get guys to show up to recruitment events, which I know shouldn't happen, but often through recruitment training and activities that they know they have a role and what you think that role looked like. We had very specific roles for seniors, and very much it was usually they're much more involved in the later couple steps of recruitment and days of recruitment. So whether it be in smaller one-on-one, two-on-one, two-on-two conversations with PNMs, but we definitely included seniors more later in the process. We wanted to make sure everyone had a role. So what does it look like to get everyone to contribute from there? So questions? I've done a lot of talking pretty quickly. And then just want to remind people that we do have the DU portal. If you're not aware, the recruitment tab in the DU portal not only can be used as an opportunity to track your PNMs and your names lists, you can import like 1,500 people lists from your IFC. You can just add people and use it more for informal recruitment. This goes back to me saying, like, once formal recruitment or summer recruitment's done, the next steps of what does that look like. That tool also is how you report associate members and initiates. So if you're not aware how to use the recruitment portal tool, please talk to your liaison, and we will get in touch and help you with that. So just definitely want to make sure that you're using the portal and you understand how to use the portal. But the portal does have a recruitment tool that's specifically designed to help you organize, track, and move people along. You can, once you type in a PNM's name, you can, and he has a little profile, you can drag his name through the process. So once you add him as a post associate, as a potential new member, you can say, hey, you contacted him, the person has accepted a bid, and all the different steps as you go along. So perfect. Questions? I will say this. If you would like to get a copy of the PowerPoint slide, if you want to put, if you want to, depending if you're an advisor, you can email me. If you're you can put something in the chat box. You can also text me. Here's my personal cell phone number. If you want to get a copy of the PowerPoint slides for the Train the Trainer program, and any of these, so you can do these activities with your chapter, please let me know and I can send them to you as well. So from that perspective, I want to thank you for joining us. I am going to stop recording, not pause recording.